Hey all. Just waiting for Kevin to jump in. Probably should have brushed my hair. Sorry. Anyway, yeah, so we're gonna jump on in a second. This is just kind of a little pre-show thing. It's great to be back at the HockeyBuzzcast and great to be starting another year of this because we've done it for I think this is our 15th year. Mike and I started this as a podcast before you could stream live and stuff like that. But yeah, now here we are, right? Crazy. Um, well, Mike, of course, has gone on to the Hockey News and is doing podcasts for them. They're really great. So, unfortunately, we can't fight with him anymore, but we'll have him back at some point. But he's right there right now. And oh, geez, I just realized this is like looks horrible over here. 1 second, hold on. Let me see if I can fix it. This is my fake background. Huh? There you go. That's better, a little bit. Yeah. All right, that's good enough. Yeah. So, hey, Randy, how you doing? Yeah, this is my fake background here. Hold on 1 second. Be right there. Let me fix one thing on it. There we go. Should be better. Yes, it looks like I'm in a studio. This is actually not a background. It's like this is actually like a thing. Anyway, that's what it looks like. So you can see it in the corner there. It kind of sucks. Let's see. Does this way? Yeah, all right, whatever. Um, all right. Yeah, Randy. Yeah, still exciting stuff for the Calgary Flames for you. It's going to be pretty good. I'm looking. What's funny about last night? We'll talk about this on the show, of course, when Kevin gets here. But we're just waiting for Kevin Allen. He's logging on in a second. Just told me, so he should be good. Yeah, and yeah, so we're going to talk about a lot of things today. We're going to talk about Ovechkin, of course. We're going to talk about Gretzky in the era of now, what it would be like. Because Kevin's the guy who has seen it all. Like he was covering Gretzky in his prime, and he's got like I think 15 years on me. So yeah, he's got that going on. You nervous, Randy? Yeah. Oh, thanks, Clutch. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. I did predict Columbus would have a good season, right? I did. Thanks for remembering. Yeah, I thought. I don't know. Just it's hockey. Like hockey is hockey. It's weird. There are some things. If you spent enough of your life watching hockey, for me, that's probably about 40 years watching hockey. You just sort of get a feel on things, and just especially things like the Blue Jackets, because whenever teams go through adversity, they're always better than you think they would be. They're always better. I mean, that's always been the case, right? And like last night, for example, you have the game going on with Montreal and Chicago, and I was talking to Kevin Gibson during the day, and I'm like, you know what? Chicago's going to win that game. And Kevin's like, no way, it's going to be Montreal 6-1. I'm like, nope, this is you got to just hockey. It's hockey. The way hockey works. It's hockey gods stuff. You know, it's definitely gonna go that way. And like I feel tonight, like Columbus is playing Philly, they should beat Philly, and you know what? They won't. I think Philly will. I think Philly will win tonight, and it's a great story both ways. But either it sucks that one of those, Columbus or Montreal, has to not make the playoffs, because it would have been really fun if both of them could have made the playoffs somehow. But they can't, obviously. So that would have been something, because they both kind of deserve it. It's both been kind of a crazy year for them. I mean, Columbus has the hell of a story. Montreal is Montreal, and no one picked them in the playoffs. No one. I mean, that's just a crazy thing in and of itself, right? So yeah, I think that's a story and a half. You see what's going on with Kevin. 1 second. This is just the pre-show if you guys are watching. All okay? Question mark. We have a theme song for the show now. Wait till you hear that. I'll answer some questions from the chat room here while we're doing this. Okay, so let's see. I predicted the Flames to make the playoffs, Randy. I did. They were in my playoff hunt, and I just thought they would be better than people thought. For what it's worth. Will I miss Tortorella? No comment. No comment on that. I have a good relationship with the Flyers. No comment. I think it was time, though. It was definitely time, and he did a good job in some ways. Like there's some things that he did, but there's some things that he couldn't do, and there is a generational gap now between players and coaches, that are in their 50s and 60s. There's a big gap there. There is. I also predicted, thanks while we're talking about it, Washington to come in first place in the Atlantic, in the Metro. I knew Washington was going to have a good year. I just felt like they made great signings in the offseason, so that's that. I thought they would do well. All right, so what's the next question here? Who do you think? Okay, the new Flyers head coach, Tocchet would be obvious, right? Like that, people are jumping on that. I think it's more because it's obvious than really I think that it's going to happen. Like I think Vancouver is going to work really hard to keep Tocchet there. That's what I've heard at least. Tocchet and Briere have a great relationship going back a ways. Briere when he first came in was with Phoenix. He got drafted like right when they went from Winnipeg to Phoenix, and at that time, Tocchet was there too. So Tocchet kind of took Briere under his wing. So they have a long relationship. They know each other really well, and yeah, they do. That's for sure. So that's a good thing. They really do know each other. But there's people in Philly who are like, that's there's too much inbreeding. Like Briere, Jones, they're all like, we want new things, and sometimes you do want new things, but you also want to build a culture. And look at, for example, Boston. They're all inbreeding too. I mean, Neely, Sweeney, these are all Boston guys, and I think that Philly kind of looks at themselves in the same way. But that doesn't answer your question. My opinion, David Carl from Denver is going to be the Flyers' new coach. I've heard a lot about that. Plus, he's got that orange hair, which would be so good on the bench. Anyway, a lot of people like Jay Woodcroft, which yeah, they do. I think he's a good coach too. I think he would be okay, but I think Carl is the guy. Okay, let's see what else we have here. If you're the Flames, are you busy in the offseason? Yes, they are. I mean, they were busy at the end of the season. I like the move for Farabee and Frost. I actually think that those guys are going to get better. I don't think they've seen their total upside yet, especially Frost, and I think Farabee went backwards a little bit because of Tortorella. So I think that both those guys, when they have a fresh new season, they're going to be good. That trade's going to be well worth it. I know a lot of people think right now they're not really performing as you wanted them to, but they're really not just a this year thing. They're in there. Let's see. Dustin's hungry like a wolf. Nice. But Carl is he's young. He's very young, which is the downside for sure. That's a problem. It could be a big issue, but we'll see. I think the thing I think about him is he's very smart. Like, I'm really for people who are very smart, and that's definitely the way I go. So I'm gonna pause myself for a second here. I'm just gonna mute myself for a second while I call Kevin and see what's going on. Right back. All right, Kevin's gonna be here very shortly. I sent the link to the wrong place because Mike used to do that stuff. He's better at than me. Let's see. Oh, Dustin Wolf, man, he deserves to be in. There need to be 4 Calder finalists this year. I'm just sorry, there just need to be, because there are 4 Calder finalists this year. Without Dustin Wolf, Calgary's not looking at any of this, right? I mean, that's the reality. Kevin will be on in just a second, and that'll be good. So as soon as we see him, he'll be on. But yeah, so Dustin Wolf, I really think, I think that, man, watch him the other night. Like that last game I watched with him was just amazing. Like the last game Calgary won, where he made that save on the weird bounce off the back. It was just incredible. Matt Martin wearing an A tonight for Palmieri, huh? From Palmieri. That makes sense. This is the last Islanders home game. Yeah, Matt. That's a good guy. Okay, Carl. That's a good question. Okay, you got a good question there, basically. So what's going on is this. Matt Carl played with Pronger in Philly, and that is David Carl's brother. Yeah. So Matt Carl was a good defenseman, perfect defenseman to play with Pronger. Like, he definitely made his weight because he played with Pronger. That's no question about that. Pat Maroon's retiring. I know. He's. I guess once you play with every team, you're done, huh? Let's. Oh man, come on. Kevin's having technical issues. Sorry, we're jumping on in a second. I don't know. Maybe I should call him again. Well, anyway, he's doing it from his phone today because he had a computer issue, so I got to get him another computer. Yeah, it's his brother, and I didn't know I didn't know they were related either. Like, they don't look like each other. I just didn't have any idea that Matt Carl and Dave Carl were related until very recently. Yeah, Landeskog is such a great story. Obviously such a great story there. And you can watch that documentary they did on it's on Max right now. The NHL Network did with it. It's about coming back. It's just fantastic. If you watch that, you're going to be rooting for this guy for the rest of your life. Like, he's just. And if you're a college, oh, here's Kevin. Here he is. I got him. I see him. He's somewhere in there. He'll be joining you in a second. He's just now floating around the room. So we'll wait till he gets settled up, and I'll put him on the screen for you guys. That is just the bottom of Kevin's face. We got to lift you up a little bit, unless you don't want your eyes being seen at all. There we go. We're gonna go with that. All right, Kevin, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks.
There we go. Excellent.
Happy to be here finally.
Yes, it's good to see you.
Yeah, technology is not my friend today, apparently. So
yeah, we got to work on that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We'll get that together. But no, it doesn't matter how you're here, which is great, and that's all that matters at all. Everybody in the chat room says hi to you because I know you don't have the chat room on your app, so everybody's excited to see you. So we're gonna do this introduction, and we're gonna get started here.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
There's gonna be a song, Kevin. Briefly, there's gonna be a song after you actually say your name. You ready? Be ready. Okay, there you go. Hello, it's April 15th, 2025.
So it does beg the question of where these conversations on Saturday begin.
He's Kevin Allen. We'll try this again. I forgot how to do this. I go first.
Yeah,
you go first. You go first, then I'll go. Here we go.
Wait a minute.
Is that right? Cool. Hello, Hockey World. Yeah. It's April 15th, 2025.
Hi, I'm Kevin Allen from Detroit Hockey Now.
And I'm Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. Anyway, welcome to the show. Welcome to our new season of the HockeyBuzzcast. This is our 15th season, Kevin.
That's 15. Hard to believe. Yeah. It seems like I remember when you first started to do podcasts, and it seems like yesterday, and now you're telling me it's 15 years. Like, holy cow!
Back then, you were like, "What's a podcast?" Everybody was like, "What's a podcast?" Back then.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think we were one of the first hockey podcasts out there because most of the podcasts at that time were just tech podcasts, like people were talking about computers and stuff like that. And I listened to those, so I should do this. I should do them. And there was one called Buzz Out Loud that CNET put out, which I loved. The two people on it, I've become friends with them in recent years too. They were just amazing, and they would basically do this kind of show. It was this kind of thing, but they would talk about technology. And I went on it a couple times a couple years ago. But so they had Buzz Out Loud. So when I said it's got to be, I would have used Buzz Out Loud, but I said I'm gonna change it to the HockeyBuzzcast because not Buzz Out Loud hockey version. All right, so we're gonna do a different format this year, Kev. I'm gonna actually be organized. Ready for this?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, so we're going to do today is going to be because it's getting warm out. And I walked on the beach bit today. It's really nice outside. It feels like wedding season. So I'm going to do our format today is going to be something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue.
All right. Okay.
We're going to start with something old, okay? Because I want to talk about Wayne Gretzky for a second, and this is not just as a hockey player, just as a hockey player, not anything else. And obviously, you covered him face to face. You got 15 years on me, so you covered him face to face for sure. But there's my question that I have for you, and I thought about this. Like we see Ovechkin's breaks this record, and Ovechkin still has time left, obviously, because. And then you see like Austin Matthews coming in, and he's on pace to do it, but both of those guys are in the era of better equipment and also way better training and way better fitness. If Gretzky was in the era of this kind of fitness and could have played played longer and played, I think that it played longer at a higher level, like these guys are doing. Like Crosby putting putting a point per game up for 20 straight seasons. I mean, this kind of stuff is crazy. Gretzky couldn't do that, but then again, it was a totally different world back then.
Yeah, I mean, this is really the kind of debate that has taken place in bar rooms for
Oh yeah,
decades. Just the idea of what would a player be like, and really, back in my era, there was the great discussion about Gordie Howe.
right.
Gordie played at 6'1",
Yeah,
202, and really his weight never varied. But the difference would be. And Gordy never worked out. There was no
yeah, right.
weight,
That's the thing.
weight training or any of that stuff. But what we always forget is if Gordy was playing in this era, he would probably play at 220 at a
Oh
minimum.
yeah.
He would have been,
He wouldn't have
he
grown up
did.
eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. You know what I mean? It was
No, for sure, for sure. And even now, like the amount of effort that players put into, what they put in their bodies in terms of fuel, as they sometimes call it.
yeah, right.
What they eat. I mean, the idea of going out for beers and cheeseburgers, those days are gone. And
Yeah,
I remember a player telling me, kind of off the record that if you want to eat a cheeseburger now in the NHL, you got to do it alone, because
I want to be alone with a cheeseburger for a while, Kevin.
yeah, exactly. Because I mean, if you're out there and you start eating cheeseburgers or too many carbs or something, guys will say something to you. And
Yeah,
he was genuinely sincere about that. He said,
I,
the idea. I mean, in the old days, like a part of the NHL experience was the bonding that went on, and that everyone went to the bar after practice.
right, right. Yeah,
And now that just doesn't happen.
we had
Um,
Rexy's in Philly, which is like right across the bridge, and that was the place where all the Flyers could be found from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, all the time.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And that was part of the way they bonded as a team. That was part of the camaraderie.
Yeah,
And now that that those kinds of things, like I think it's kind of funny when you hear, great planning now goes into when you have like team gatherings on the road, like the rookie
yeah,
dinner,
yeah,
and some of the other things that they do, where that happened all the time. Yeah, the
yeah,
captain would just say, "We're all meeting at Fred's." Bar, and everybody would
yeah.
just have to show up. That's just the way it was. So,
I know there was
it
a
is,
Flyers rookie who was, part of the tradition in the Flyers world, and probably other places too, is that the rookies take the veterans out for dinner at one point.
yeah,
The rookies.
I think that still goes on unless it's changed in the last 4 or 5
Yeah, it
years
happens here in
because,
Philly a lot, I know, and I didn't know if it happened other places too. But he was like, they all wanted to go to a steakhouse, and he's like, I don't eat meat.
yeah, no, yeah, that is so true. But that's a special thing. But the bills on
Yeah.
that are enormous.
Oh, they're
You know,
enormous. And then these rookies are making, I mean, if you're making $800,000 a year, you can take people out to dinner. But still,
yeah, but
I mean,
not.
they don't have the money the other guys have, but
No, that's exactly right. So, and I've heard, stories of,
yeah,
the captain reimbursing the
yeah, that does happen,
rookie
I think.
later, and but he
Yeah,
said, look, I don't want this to ever come out, and
right, yeah,
because if you're making, I mean, 800,000 is a lot of money. I'm not going to But what I'm saying is, and you're in a 50% tax bracket. Now you're down to 400,000.
Yeah. Right.
Then all of a sudden you feel like if you're a player, you got to have a nice house. So,
Yeah, you can't.
you
Yeah,
know,
you can't. You got. Not very few players are like Peter Forsberg, and they live on $200,000 a year for the rest of their careers.
yeah, yeah, it's just it's sort of a different type situation,
Yeah,
they do have those kinds of things. But you're right. I mean, getting back to where we started this, just on the training alone,
yeah,
and now it's 365 days a year. In the old days, players wouldn't work out during the off season. Like training camp was used to get into shape.
yeah,
And
yeah.
now, like, you're in trouble if you don't show up at
Oh yeah,
training
you
camp.
you get suspended if you come in. Like they'll send you away. I've seen that happen. Like they'll send you away to get into shape. That just that's the reality, right? So you have to be
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
I know. Go ahead.
yeah. No, but I was just gonna say. I mean, that's such a big, difference. Like, yeah, I remember, back when Gordie Howe played in the World Hockey Association. Um, they had the mile run for the Hartford Whalers. Well, Gordy was never a runner, even when he was in his 30s or
Yeah,
20s. That wasn't his thing. And so they decided, Gordy was 50, that he didn't have
yeah,
to run. And, this Harry Neal tells the story that, he didn't want it to be a big thing. So he said, look, he said, here's this way it's going to happen. The rule is just going to be if you're 50 and you're playing, you don't have to run. So when you're 50, you won't have to run either. So
yeah.
that was how they sort of got around that. But yeah,
It's hard to ask Gordy how to do much. Like he does enough for you on the ice.
yeah. Well, and uh,
And he
I'm sure.
literally wrote the book on Gordie Howe. Kevin has a book out there, an autobiography on Gordie Howe.
Yeah, but the thing about Gordy is he didn't much like that, to be honest with you. Like that,
Yeah.
that's not who he is. He wanted
Right.
to
Right.
do it what it is, but it was hard on him. He just had a hard
Yeah.
time with running at
Yeah.
that age. And I mean, this is a guy that he's such a physical specimen. Like the great debate that's going on just recently, that
Mhm.
is really an old debate was should, now that we're talking about Wayne Gretzky and
Yeah.
Alex Ovechkin is, should Gordy's WHA goals count?
Right. Right.
And they don't. They disavow all knowledge that they being the NHL
If they did,
disavows all
what would that
knowledge
equate
that
to, Nick?
the
What would that equate to
WHA
if they did?
yeah even existed, let alone that there was
Yeah.
goals scored. And and when you have debates, there's always like, how good was the WHA?
Yeah.
And
Right.
it's hard to get a handle on it
It
because
is.
there was a smattering, but there was great players. I mean, Gordie Howe
Yeah.
and Bobby Hall. I mean, those were great players that were
They
playing
were
in the
still NHL
WHA.
players. They just went to that league.
Yeah, yeah, and Nielsen, Hedberg, those were great players that went over. And like, how great was, people were saying, well, those 40 goal seasons that Gordy was having, in the WHA, like how, what does that really mean? Well, what it means is when he came back and played in the NHL after the annexation of it, like
Yeah.
he scored 15 goals. He was 52 years old.
Right. Right.
I,
Right.
I mean, so he that league must have been pretty good because he was still able to score 15 goals
Yeah.
even, at that age. So,
And
um,
the interesting
yeah,
contrast to that is Gretzky had WHA goals too.
he did, but not
Not many in the
nearly
first,
as
but he was
many.
young.
Yeah, yeah, he was 17. Yeah,
Yeah. So that's the
so
other thing. But that's a totally different world too. Um.
yeah,
So yeah. So I just wonder, like, I always wonder about there's a really great meme going out there. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but it has like picture of like four goaltenders with their old equipment on and stuff like that, and that says these were the goalies of Gretzky's era. And when you look at them, they just look terrible compared to goalies today. Just standing there, as you know, they're not. Everyone wants to see everybody in the typical, butterfly or whatever. Their pads are short. They look wobbly a little bit. It's all just like, and that's true too, right? So you have that element of it as well. That I mean, goalies are way better now, than they were.
Tremendous.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, goalies look like waifs, back
they really
then.
did. I was watching a
They,
Pele Lindbergh game the other day for fun of it, and I was like, "Holy cow! I don't remember him like this at all."
yeah. No, I mean, they were wearing rags,
Yeah,
on just in terms of, like, you could actually hurt goalies. Like now they wear suits of armor,
yeah.
but back then you could hurt a goalie.
They literally looked like defensemen trying to block shots to me in a way. Like
Yeah.
compared to the way
Yeah.
goalies work now, like they're much more like how a defenseman will block a shot. To a degree. I mean, not completely, but because their pads were so thin,
Right.
their leg pads were thin, and that was and their shoulder pads were thinner, and everything was smaller, and there's all these more openings, like way more openings out there for them to shoot on. But also that era, defensemen weren't all Bobby Orr yet. Like now everybody skates like Bobby Orr, so it's
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there were, like, every team,
yeah,
was obligated to have at least one pylon back on
yeah, yeah,
defense.
yeah, right,
I
exactly,
mean, like, yeah, every team. I mean, just to sort of put it in perspective for those of you who are a little bit older, every team had one player like, um, Brad Marsh.
I was going to say Brad
Um,
Marsh. It's so funny you said that. I was thinking the same thing.
yeah, yeah, I mean, and by that I mean, Brad Marsh was an effective NHL defenseman, but there
Yeah,
was one guy who, wasn't all that mobile, but was kind of wily and sort of figured out how to play the position. But you could get wide on him. Like, when's the last
yeah,
time you've seen a guy, even the fastest skaters in the league,
yeah.
go just would take a little move to the outside and just blow by a guy wide?
It's
Like,
rare, it's super
yeah,
rare,
it
and
doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't happen. Like,
yeah,
occasionally you'll get a step on a guy, when he's turning,
you'll see
or
McDavid or McKinnon do it once in a while, but like,
yeah, exactly. Those guys where, you sort of misread your gap, and
yeah,
they sense it, and then they're by you. But in the older days, like Mike Bossy, at least once a game would go wide on a defenseman,
yeah, I know.
and and
It was all there. Like I remember in Philly, it was like Bill Barber or Reggie Leach. Like these guys, it was completely and Rick McLeish. These guys just made and now defensemen can skate backwards as fast as those guys can skate forward. These guys can skate forward almost. So it's like it's a
yeah,
very different thing because skating backwards compared to the fastest players, but like even in Pavel Bure's time, like players couldn't skate backwards as fast as he could skate forward.
yeah,
You would still see it even then. Like even when you watch the Rangers at game 7, I watched that the other day with Vancouver. Even when you watch that, you're like, this is still like defensemen aren't. They would be getting a lot of critiques for what they're doing in this game. Like you can tell it's not as the whole thing has become more finely tuned, and the whole thing has become very much like the coaches know what they're doing. The players learn this from a very young age what to do. And it's very different than and then all the training that goes on. It's like that's why Austin Matthews I think will probably break this record because I think he will probably be able to play. I mean, and if he missed games with injury even, but he's still he's still on a pace to do it. But that's just another world. But everyone else remember that Gretzky has more assists than anyone else has points, right? So it's like
yeah. I mean, I think what this reminds us more than anything else is that no one should ever say, "Well, that record will never be broken." Like,
yes,
who thought anybody? Wayne Gretzky came in an era where he was able to get registered more than 200 points.
yeah.
And you just thought, well, no one's ever going to break that. I mean, he
And
just
can
had
you imagine, Kevin, if that
so
Oilers team played without the 2-line pass?
yeah,
Think about that.
yeah, yeah, all of that. So but the bottom line is they're all great players. I mean, Ovechkin
Yeah,
was great and is great, and Gretzky was great. And I'll tell you though, it just when we've been talking about so much about Ovechkin, it just reminded me. This just stuns me. But when I think about it, is that Gretzky hasn't played in 26 years.
yeah, I know.
I mean, you got to essentially be 40 years old to have
Yeah,
decent memories of watching
it's like
Gretzky.
Gordie Howe was to me. Like
Yeah,
I never saw Gordie Howe play.
yeah,
I mean, I saw him play for Hartford, but I never saw him play for the Red Wings.
yeah,
And yes, I mean, yeah, that this whole generation hasn't seen that, and we haven't really. I really think that some of them saw Mario. Mario might have been that's always a classic question. Mario or Ovechkin, who's the better scorer? I think Mario might win, in my opinion. Still, I
I
just think,
I would say that too. The way that I have always sorted out the Holy Trinity,
yeah,
um, or the quad, depending on who you get
yeah,
is I thought that Bobby Orr was the most electrifying
yeah,
player that I ever saw. I thought that Mario Lemieux was the best goal scorer I ever saw.
yeah,
1-on-1, like in particular, he was
yeah.
just, and on a breakaway. Like no one was better on a breakaway than Mario
No,
Lemieux
he was
was.
ridiculous. He was ridiculous.
Yeah, and then Wayne Gretzky, of course, was the greatest passer and thinker,
Yeah,
um, you know, of the game. And Gordie Howe, I thought, was the best all around player. A
yeah,
guy
yeah,
that would, they would rest him by putting him on defense. Just recently, within the last year, I have laid hands on this Associated Press story where
okay,
they were writing about. Gordie Howe in a game, and they were just talking about a routine game in the middle of the season. And the guy just wrote, and Gordie Howe, who played approximately 50 minutes in the game, and they just matter of factly just kind of threw it in there, like
yeah.
he
It's
played
just
50 minutes of a 60-minute game.
that's
So
insane. I mean,
yeah,
that's and that guy doesn't have to work out before the season. You're good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
If you can do that,
yeah,
you're okay.
yeah,
All right,
I
so
do
now we're on
remember.
this. Go
Wait,
ahead.
just one more thing about that whole
Yeah,
play thing. I remember Bill Gadsby, who um, a lot of people don't have no idea who he is, but he was a Hall of Famer, and he was one of Gordie Howe's best friends. And I did his book many many years ago,
yeah,
and we were talking about the fact that it was Chris Pronger who was playing, and there was a big hullabaloo that in a playoff game,
yeah,
um, Pronger had played 30 minutes or 32 minutes, and he said, back when I played, if I only played 30 minutes in a game, I'd be worried. The coach was mad.
right.
The coach was mad at me,
Yeah,
So
right.
he says because he said he played. They essentially played four defensemen in the 50s and 60s, and the top pairing would get the lion's share at 30
Yeah,
35 minutes. So
yeah. There you go. I mean, that's pretty. That's just amazing. Now, moving on to something new,
yeah,
from something old, something new. I think there's two things I want to talk about in this category. The first one has to be Demidov.
yeah,
And last night was just an epically historical one of those moments you kind of will remember for a long time. If you watched it, you'll remember where you were type things, like Mario Lemieux's comeback game, things like that, the games that I just remember because that building was so crazy excited, and he really just didn't disappoint at all.
no, no. Yeah, just what an exciting player,
Yeah,
and it really sort of as for me now, who a guy that covers Detroit,
yeah,
because it's a really big thing here
yeah,
in Michigan in terms of how you develop and when do you bring young players
yeah,
along? And
yeah,
in
exactly,
Philadelphia, it's an issue as well,
definitely.
um, where it's a huge discussion in Detroit because Ken Holland used to talk about, he liked his prospects overripe. And so
Yeah,
he liked to
yeah,
keep them in the minors. Well, Steve Eisman does similarly.
yeah,
And here what we've seen in Montreal is Hudson comes out of college and
yeah,
they live with his mistakes and they put him in. And
yeah,
Demidov comes over from Russia where he's played in the KHL. And
yeah,
that's not a like if you're a top player in the KHL, as we all know, it
yeah.
sometimes does not translate.
Right,
Uh,
right. It often
they,
doesn't.
yeah, they come over and they don't play well. But
Yeah,
Montreal just brings the kid in, they plug him into the lineup and say go. And
yeah. And
and it, and
this
it,
is a
and it
city that
feels
loves. Yeah,
doesn't it feel like they've been rewarded for that concept? I mean, they've done
absolutely.
that with younger players, and here they're in the playoffs, and Detroit is not.
Well, it comes
Uh,
down to drafting, right? Like at the end of the day, Hudson and Demidov, like these are two guys that, and Detroit does a good job drafting too. Like Sider, these guys weren't, were surprises when they were picked, but not so much the Canadians players, but it does feel like, Montreal is like a mini Paris, like a mini city of love, right? And Montreal loves their players and they love their team. And
Yeah.
they fall in love with their players, like more, I think, than any other fan base out there. And as an example, well, they had like a parade for Kovalev when he retired. Like they just have this thing that is completely,
Yeah.
they love them, and this guy is just right up their alley. This is like the perfect. He's fast, like remember these are the Flying Frenchmen. He's fast, and he's got skill. He reminds me, and some people in the chat room said it too as well. He really reminded me of Yager last night. Watching him play, he has that big wide stride, which enables him to shield the puck so well because his legs are just out. He just creates this space around himself.
Yeah. And the flair for the dramatic too.
The flair for the dramatic,
That's
yeah.
all about Yager as well. Yeah.
And yet Montreal lost. And the thing about that, and I predicted Montreal would lose because it's hockey, and I just I just the way it works, it's the way it. Because when you bring a player in like that, there were two things working against the Canadians last night, in my opinion. First of all, this is a team that has been Cinderella all year, right? They are they're doing things no one thought they would do. Everybody's just happy because they're exceeding expectations until now, because now they're supposed to be in the playoffs. They just need one game to win. So now the expectations are up here. Now they have to get this win. So playing that team who's played completely loose and fancy free is suddenly getting, that young team is suddenly going to face a lot of pressure. And that's like something that once they get to the playoffs, it'll be fine. They're not supposed to beat Washington or whatever. But right now, to make the playoffs, they had it. They were close, and they played really kind of poorly recently. They should have been in the playoffs by now. So now the fans are getting frustrated.
Yeah. Well, the whole collection of teams down near the wild card are all flawed.
Yeah, they're not good teams. We're not talking about.
No, there's something about them. Like you give them a lot of credit for being in the hunt and battling it out and all that. I mean, like the Columbus Blue Jackets, like their teams. A lot of people thought they were going to be, in the 25 to 32 range, and here they are, the last team that battling with Montreal.
I didn't pick Montreal to make the playoffs. I don't think many people did. I mean, I don't think anybody did. And the other thing they had going against them is what I call the Eric Lindros curse. Okay, and this is what the Eric Lindros curse is. Lindros would often go out for the Flyers for long periods of time because of the concussions, and the Flyers, while he was out, would play pretty well because they would all like rise up. And then Lindros would return famously, like Game 7 against the Devils. He returned and got knocked out by Scott Stevens. That was his first game in like a couple months, and the Flyers have been playing well. Got there, and then Lindros shows up for Game 7, and suddenly the Flyers are watching Lindros. The players, it's just the players start watching and I felt like last night the Canadians were nervous, but they were also waiting for Demidov to do things because it was just so exciting, like to see what he could do.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah. Well, and it did create a national buzz because I was at a game in Detroit, and it suddenly worked its way around the press box, and I'm sure it was in the stands
everywhere
as well. That Demidov scored. And boy, how did he score?
What a goal! I mean, like a crazy goal. They interviewed Guy Carbonneau between periods on the broadcast, and Guy Carbonneau says, "I would have shot that." He comes off the boards, it's right where it is. He's like, "I would have shot that. I would never have thought in a million years to cut it back." And Demidov does that thing that new players do that I love, which is relatively new. I don't know what it's called, but it's when they put their forward-facing skate on just its heel.
Yeah.
When they heel, they put just their heel on, which makes it almost like a circular pivot that they can pivot around, and it's just like they can turn like a dime on that, and it's just it was such a good play, and but now Montreal's up against it tonight. Columbus has 2 games, and they're against Philly and the Islanders, and Columbus is playing very well. Where Montreal is not playing well, and Montreal's got to play Carolina. You only need 1 point, I guess, but it's just kind of.
Yeah, Carolina, they got nothing to play for. They'll be guys that are rested, and So, I wouldn't discount Montreal. And Columbus has to win both games in
Yeah,
regulation, which is another,
yeah.
important
I mean, I think the
element.
Flyers will beat them tonight, which is just because, again, hockey. The way hockey works.
Right.
It's just
Yeah,
like
exactly.
it's just
Exactly.
like the Columbus now suddenly has hope, and they're going to go in and then give a game that they absolutely should win, and they won't.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
that's just hockey, right? So, all right, so we're gonna get back to something borrowed in a second. We're gonna go to something blue, and by blue, I want to talk about the some blue teams. First of all, the Toronto Maple Leafs,
Yeah.
and what they're up to right now. They got the first seed, and my whole theory on the fans between Montreal and Toronto has always been that Toronto fans always expect to lose, and Montreal fans always blame everybody else for losing. And that's I mean, that's the way it works, right? So Toronto fans now are going to have to face a demon in Ottawa, which is like the last thing they wanted to do. I mean, would have been better if they played Tampa or Florida. I mean, obviously, I think Tampa would be the best matchup for them, but at the end of the day, Ottawa, that team is exciting. It's a fun team to watch.
Yeah, I mean, every year we have this discussion about who's the team you don't want to play, and the
Yeah,
Senators are it this year. Just
they are this.
because,
They are this year.
there's a lot of, yeah, I mean, they're a Johnny come lately in terms of being, into the playoffs. But
Yeah,
you look at that roster. In the off season, they had a goalkeeper, and that adds to the credibility of the team. And of course, Brady Tkachuk is now older and wiser, and
yeah,
they've there's just everything about them, and they make that bold trade. I mean,
yeah.
that really was a bold
It
a
really
trade
was.
with Buffalo, and bringing in a power forward
Yeah,
that sort of fits into their game better,
it was.
but giving up a center who not only was he producing at a high level, but he was Brady Kachuk's closest friend on
I
his
know he was
team.
like a
So
lifer in Ottawa. It felt like he was going to be a lifer in Ottawa type thing. Like he was the guy, and he was just getting better and better all the time.
yeah,
Um, but there comes Brady Kachuk, who now is a national hero in the United States. It's
yeah.
another story altogether. I mean, the Kachucks are literally superstars on another level in the NHL right now. As far as the like mainstream sports, they're not playing much right now, but in the playoffs, I think you're going to see the return of the magical of the Kachucks. Like they're going to be there again, and it's just like it's insane.
Although I have a worry that as much as they keep saying Matthew Tkachuk will be ready for the start of the
I
playoffs, I
know.
mean, don't you wonder whether or not how ready he's really going to be? Like, I have no idea what his injury is, but
Yeah,
it just feel like if it's an injury that kept him out of the lineup, and knowing what the Kachuk makeup is, then I'm thinking it was a pretty serious injury, and I'm wondering whether or not what kind of player he'll be when he comes back, because
yeah,
there's when you come back from an injury, and then that's one date, and then when you're going to be a really, really effective player, or be the player that you once were, and that's a
yeah,
different date. So I don't know, where they're going to be on that, and I don't. Florida is a terrific team, as we
yeah,
saw last year, but they've gone through a lot here now.
yeah. They have.
Ekblad's been gone, for a long time. He's going to be rusty
Yeah,
as well. They had
right.
Barkov, out with a
Yeah, with that. Yeah,
with
Barker's a
an
major
injury.
player. He's
Yeah,
major.
yeah, they had him out. He's back now, but so they've had a lot to deal with, and it doesn't feel like they're at the same place where they were last year when they were entering the
Not yet.
postseason.
And fortunately for them, they're playing Tampa, who they have really owned lately. And
Yeah,
but that might not matter at the same time. I really do think that Kachuk is kind of a Kucherov type situation where he could have been back, but we want to get Marchand, so we're going to keep him out and just make sure he's okay. I really do think that with Kachuk, like when Kucherov came back for the playoffs, he was ridiculous. Remember, like the first right away, he was
yeah,
incredible.
yeah. No, that's a. And you're a conspiracy theorist, and
Absolutely.
but to be honest with you, like I buy that one.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
mean,
a
and I
seller.
think,
I'm a
and they
buyer
did
on
it to
that.
Florida too. That's the other funny thing. Is that Kucherov did he came back to play against and beat the Panthers. So
Yeah,
they know they're going to play the Tampa Bay Lightning. So I think that this is kind of like like I don't know, a tit for tat type thing. It's just kind of like crazy. But yeah, now
I
on to
mean, but
something. Go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, continue. Please finish your thought.
Well, I was just going to say, the other thing I worry about with the Panthers is, and look, it's like he's going to come around. Like he's not the first player ever to change teams. But Brad Marchand looks like out of place
He
in
does.
Florida. Like he
He
looks
does.
lost. Like he looks like, what am I doing in this jersey? And he's just not the same. Hasn't been the same guy yet that he was. Now, like I said, people just need time to kind of adjust to what's
He's
going on
also
there.
not playing in meaningful games. He's the kind of guy who steps up right when that happens. So
Yeah, yeah, and everything I've read about how he's fit in down there is all very positive. That he was
yeah,
instantly, a big part of the room and all that, which makes sense with his personality and such. So,
yeah,
so I'm sure it'll be fine. But that was my observation when I saw him live
yeah,
recently, and
yeah.
that he just didn't seem right, or maybe it was me. It was having trouble adjusting to the
I
idea of him
think
in a different jersey.
what he kind of reminds me of is like when I was a kid, we would go to school with certain clothes on, and then we'd see our friends in church looking totally uncomfortable.
Yeah,
In their nice church clothes and wearing the stupid shoes and everything like that. He looks like he
yeah.
put on his church clothes and he doesn't want to be in them.
Yeah, yeah. No, I could definitely see that as well.
That's what it feels like. But I think they got him to play with Bennett because of the Four Nations. I think how well they played together, and Bennett's been out a lot too, so they haven't really gotten a chance to see that. I mean, you're not going to see the Florida Panthers until Game 1 of the playoffs.
Yeah. Now, is there anybody in the league that you know there around the league? There's a lot of teams that covet thy neighbor's center and Bennett. Like it's
Yeah,
amazing how many teams like you don't covet the Nathan McKinnon or Connor McDavid and all that because you can't get them.
no,
But
they're married
Bennett,
off. They're married off.
but yeah, Bennett, you're thinking, yeah, we might be able to get him. So I think there's a lot of coveting of
There's a lot
of
of coveting. I think Florida believes they can get him. They got close to getting him signed at one point, but I do think that his stock will rise again in the playoffs. And I think that because that's the kind of player he is. So it could turn out to be a situation like Montour, like where they just can't do it.
yeah, yeah,
And but if Bennett's available, he becomes immediately the best UFA available. Like if he does get out there, and I think he'll be the best UFA available in my opinion immediately
yeah,
because he's a
yeah. There's a
center.
lot of teams interested in
Yeah,
him,
he's a center. He's a big game scorer. He can score. He can hit. Like
right?
in Philly, he played well with Konechny too. There's another thing. The Flyers are looking for a center. They would be all over Bennett if he was available. They have money and they don't have any centers. Yeah, so that's the thing. So now on to the final topic today of something borrowed. And by borrowed today, I'm going to do this. I think we're going to pay tribute to the Canadian teams borrowing American players. Because when you look down the line, Toronto, Austin Matthews, right?
Yeah,
Ottawa, Brady Tkachuk. Talked about that. Sanderson too. No, Sanderson. Yeah, Sanderson too, right? American player, the
yeah,
defenseman. Go to Montreal, Caulfield, Hudson. Go to and others too. Let's go out west now to Winnipeg, Hellebuck. Um, it's just and Vancouver and I'm not thinking of any of the and Vancouver and Calgary not so much, but and Edmonton not so much. But the reality is like we're
yeah.
looking
You've
at
just rattled off the U.S. Olympic team essentially.
right,
Those
right. The best player,
teams,
and these
yeah,
players are all playing for Canadian teams. And when I was years ago, that was like a taboo almost, and they're all like if for the Montreal Canadiens to have their best player be an American player for a while was not something that went over very well. Like,
yeah,
it's nothing personal. It's just that this is Canada's sport, right? So I really think that is fascinating to me. And the other thing I want to mention about borrowed is this: players that are now coming in that have been borrowed from, well, not really borrowed, but they're permanently in from college. Like there's an incredible influx this year of college players that are making impacts. Like it's just, I don't remember a
yeah.
year like this. I don't remember a year like this ever. Like that this many players came in and that made this much impact at this time. You know.
Yeah, yeah, it has been a unique season in that regard,
Yeah.
to be sure. And we have, it does feel also like the changing of the guard. I mean, what Hudson is doing in Montreal,
Yeah.
it's really been amazing. And you just talked about, the skating move that
Yeah.
is new. Like it always feels like, okay, there's just nothing new in hockey. We're still
Yeah.
playing the
Right.
same way, and yet every year
Yeah.
in the KHL, and I'm sure we're going to see it, much to
Yeah.
John Tortorella's chagrin. We're going to see it there. I got the Kuznetsov
Right.
tried a lacrosse goal from in front of the net, where he picked it up in front and just hurled it lacrosse style,
Yeah.
at the goalie. So you are sort of seeing that, and I saw the other day a little spin move from Hudson that I thought was really kind of unique. I mean, it was
Yeah.
a version of what we've seen before,
Yeah.
but it just wasn't the same as
Yeah.
what we normally see in that
Yeah.
in that thing. So that's the coolest thing that the guys are still working on. When I first started covering the NHL, only about 15% of the players in the league could one time the puck. Like
Yeah. Right. Right.
Yari Curry,
Yeah.
was so unique
Yeah.
because he
Right.
was so
Right.
good at it. And now, the worst defenseman in the league can
Yeah.
one time
Everyone one
like
times the
Curry.
puck.
Yeah,
You're right. Like
yeah,
anybody can line up in the Ovechkin spot on a power play and one time it.
right,
It's or it's
right.
that that it's just kind of crazy. And by the way, in the chat room, thank you very much, Vancouver Quinn Hughes. Sorry, I can't and Brock Besser, Americans. They're helping out
Right.
the connect. So it's just I forgot about that too. So yeah, that's nuts. But yeah, anybody can do that now, and it's really fascinating. Now that some of the like Ryan Leonard came in, and he's been impressive, kind of right off the bat, which we kind of thought he would be.
Yeah, it's interesting what's changed too, and
Yeah,
it's worth kind of noting that NIL money has kept players in
in
college
college, right,
longer than
right.
we used to, see.
It's interesting.
Snuggerud stayed in Minnesota a little bit longer than the Blues would have liked, and the uh, Trey Augustine, the Red Wings' top prospect goalie, he's going back to Michigan State. Like they wanted him to come out, and he
Right.
said, "No, no,
Yeah,
I don't think so." And
yeah,
he's staying, and he's going to for his junior year, like, yeah, and we're just starting to see that, and of course Leonard chose to do that as well, and
yeah,
now he's out. So that's another thing where things are changing as a
yeah.
result of what's happening, and we're even seeing that in college because now you can go play in the CHL, and those guys can
Right.
sign and go and play in college, which should have happened all along.
It
To
should
be
have
honest
all
with you,
that, and there should be a game where the college national champion plays the Memorial Cup winner. That just has to happen at some point. I don't know why it's never happened, but it should happen.
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, and so again, but all the players I mentioned, American that are on their Americans and Canadian teams, most of those players are those teams MVPs. When you think about it, they really are. Like
yeah,
they're
yeah, for sure. I mean,
straight across the bat, and we have another one in Calgary, in Dustin Wolf, like who is another one that I didn't think about for a second, but he has been their MVP this year. Like he is really that good.
yes, yes, he's
It,
played really, really well, and
yeah,
all those. I mean, Quentin Hughes is a standard now. Like
yeah.
you hear. And when GMs kind of talk about what they're looking for, like he said, and we don't have a Quinn Hughes. They're trying to get
That's
that.
right.
Yeah,
He's become
yeah,
that a thing, like a noun,
right,
like
right.
his own. And like we had that for a while. Like we don't have a Paul Coffey. That was the thing too. Like
Right.
there's not, and before
That's
that,
right.
Bobby Orr, obviously. But like there's,
Yeah,
or like a Lanny McDonald, or not Lanny McDonald. I'm sorry,
yeah.
Robertson. These guys who were just like outliers, but they pushed the game in their direction. Like players had to play like them. When you
Well,
hear people talk about Lane Hudson, they're like, yeah, he makes moves like Quinn Hughes. That's
yeah. Well, and Lane, Hudson is that, and the same thing with the Kachucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we don't have a Brady or a Matthew Kachuk.
Right.
The flag
Right. Right.
carrier. Mean.
Yeah.
A tough guy.
Right.
Um, you know, like the rivalry that's developing between Ottawa and Detroit, and part of it is the fact that Dylan Larkin and Brady Kachuk are friends, and
Right.
they get in each other's face, over
Yeah.
this, and that's not who Dylan Larkin is, but that certainly is who Brady Kachuk is, and Matthew Kachuk, and I love that it's all so calculated too,
It
and
is, and it's
like,
like they try
yeah.
to make it so simple. Like it's like,
Right. No, and anybody who knows their dad, whose
yeah.
nickname is Walt Kachuk, but he's really
Yeah.
Keith Kachuk. But
Yeah.
I've known him, and I've said for a long time, and both he and Bill Guerin know that I've written this in books, as well
Mhm.
as the whole perspective of American hockey changed. For
Yeah.
years they
Yeah.
had centers and elite defensemen. They
Yeah.
had the Leaches, the Chelioses, the
Yeah.
Phil Housleys, guys who carried the puck, and they had centers. They had LaFontaine. They had guys coming up. What they
Madonna.
could, what they didn't have, Madonna, what they didn't have, Ronick. What they didn't have was the guys who could go in the corners with the Canadian power forwards.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, in the early '90s, they got Bill Guerin and Keith Kachuk, and the whole American hockey changed, because
Yeah.
suddenly now they had the centers and the defensemen. Now all of a sudden, when they went into the corners, they could come out with the puck,
Yeah.
and that really changed that. And Keith's been that guy forever. Well, that's the household where these guys grew up. I mean, the Kachuk family is just such a great family. I mean,
It's
it
such a great.
really is. It
We're
really
having
is a great
we're in an
family.
age of American hockey families like the Hudsons, the Hughes, but and Kachuk. It's like these
Yeah,
really crazy.
yeah.
I mean, you got Quinn Hudson played for Edmonton last night. That's kind of crazy. Cole's going to be playing for Washington soon. It's just like, yeah. I mean, I love it too, and I love to see that, and I love to see that. Here's what I remember. I went to a game with this guy who was a really big hockey guy who knew when I was really young, and he had this term that he said all the time when we were watching games. He's like, you want to make the defensemen turn their backs to you, like meaning that in his mind that was when you dump the puck in and the defensemen have to go back and get it. You need to keep the defensive turning their backs to you, because if you're physical and they're not physical, they're going to have to look over their shoulder. They're going to give up the puck. They're going to make mistakes, and that's where you're going to get. That's how you're going to forecheck. And that's what the U.S. finally did with Canada. They finally got it. They finally got it that they could make the Canadian defensemen, who were all like kind of faster and not always usually super physical, but very skilled. They had to suddenly turn their backs to the Kachucks, to the Garans, and go back and get it. You know,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
they look over their shoulders, and that's kind of crazy. So before we go, real quick, I wanted to. We do have a Red Wings fan in the chat room who wanted to ask you a question. And I know one of the questions. I'll give him some time to ask the other question. But I know one of the questions is he's really afraid that the Red Wings could lose Augustine.
Yeah, well, I mean, because if he goes one more year, if he stays for his senior year, then
Yeah.
all he has to do is go to August, and then he's a unrestricted free agent. And
Right.
one of the issues that I think the media thinks is in play here is the fact that Sebastian Kosa, a first round pick, Augustine was a second round pick, is already in the pipeline. He's already got 3 years of minor league hockey. And frankly, I don't think Augustine wants to go play. I mean,
Yeah.
the Red Wings have sent Kosa to the Toledo Walleye in the
Nice.
ECHL.
That's
Okay,
a great
he played.
name
Yeah, he played entire season for the Walleye,
for the
and then
walleye.
for the Walleye, and then then he got promoted from the Walleye to the Grand Rapids Griffins. Now, the Grand Rapids Griffin, for an AHL is such first rate. First of all, Grand Rapids is a great city in Michigan, and
Amazingly.
yeah, and it's a beautiful. They play in a really nice arena,
Yeah.
and it's a first class AHL
Yeah.
type
Yeah. It is.
existence. So, but I think that the Red Wings sort of view how we've been talking about the evolving NHL. Well, I think the
Yeah.
Red Wings think we're reaching the point where, especially with the fact we're going to have either tournaments or Olympics happening all the time, we're all, the idea of a condensed schedule, which,
Yeah.
used to be sort of, well, we'll do it every once in a while. Well, I think it's
Mm.
going to be a regular occurrence
I
now,
do too.
is
Yeah.
the way the Red Wings think. So they think, and we're seeing the reduction in the largest number of games, the highest number of games that goalies will play is shrinking. It
Oh,
wasn't
way
long ago
by
that we
far.
had goalies playing 70 games, and
Yeah.
now that's going down. Like there aren't that many goalies. I think it was a dozen or so that were playing, 55 or more.
Yeah.
And
There's I don't even think there's a dozen right now.
no, I don't know. This year I haven't paid much attention to it, but
Yeah.
last year I remember it was like a dozen. But
Yeah.
so with that idea, their idea is at some point
Right.
Kota and Augustine will be their, 47-35,
Tandem.
goalies, or, 41-41 or 45-30.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Like it's not going to be as pronounced as what we used to have, where you'd have one playing 65 and the other one playing, whatever was left.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
one of the things I hate more than anything in the world is this fact that goalies can't play back-to-back games. Like
yeah,
I don't
yeah, I
understand
don't
that at
think
all. It
yeah, yeah,
bothers me, and it especially bothers me in this way because what happens is usually if you have a back-to-back game, the starter will play the first game and the backup will play the second game almost all the time, right? So that's how it works. What if you're playing a bad team in the first game, and a good team in the second game? It's still the starter starts the first game, the backup goes to the second game. It's almost consistently that way all around the block, and it's there's no it's like the coaches are lazy, and this is the way we can just do it. We don't have to worry about it. We're not gonna make any. No one's gonna be mad at us. We're just gonna have this is how it's gonna be all the time. That's how it goes. I think I,
yeah.
I think that's a trend that's going to go away. Like I feel
I
like we're in a phase of that.
I think it's starting to already happen.
Yeah,
You do see coaches now around the league that sort of line up their goalies the way that baseball managers line up their starting pitching.
interesting.
You're starting to see that where you want to get this matchup,
Yeah,
or you want to get this team because he has success,
right,
against that,
right.
this opponent. So you are starting to see that.
Yeah,
So
and I
I do
haven't
think
seen it in
it is
Philadelphia at all.
changing. So
It's
yeah, but but I think it's happening on teams, where they have really good backups, or,
yeah,
guys that they want to get more starts to. So they're
yeah.
careful on that too. So, goaltending is still in a strange situation because invariably, as soon as you give a goalie a contract, the guy underneath usually turns out to be better, and then you're in big trouble.
No, exactly.
So,
Here's my problem with it is this, and now this is why I think it's happening. And this is would be I know you have a goalie website. This would be a good article. Um, here's my thinking on this. When I was a kid, when I was younger, and back then, and even like 10, 20 years ago, the backup goalies were the Chico Reshes of the world, like the older goalies that were starting goalies, but we're older, and now you wanted your backup to be an old guy. Your prospect would be playing in the AHL, and your young, good number starter would start, right? We have not seen, with the exception of like Jonathan Quick, who's doing that basically. There's not that many backups that are old guys.
Mm,
The backups are like basically the same age as the starters, and that's why you go back and forth. Like for a backup like Chico Resch when he was in Philly with Hextall, starting up in goal, he was like he was a mentor and he knew he was going to play like every 5 games, but he didn't care. He was there to mentor, But when you have two young goalies, time matters a lot, So it becomes a different thing.
yeah.
Um, and I think that's I wonder if that's going to change. Like if some like when like Hellebuck gets older, or when whatever these guys start to get older, are they going to be the mentor backups?
Yeah. Well, what you can't. The problem is you can't pay those backups $8 million.
Right,
You know
right.
that's
You can't do that at all. No, but
yeah.
but but at
So
some point, the Chico Rush made less money with the Flyers than they did with the Islanders. Whereas with them before, because they started accepting the fact that they're like Quick's not making the kind of money he used to make. So it's like they understand, they
yeah.
accept that.
Well, the problem is that sometimes when you got an extended contract on a goalie, like
Yeah.
you like the one Connor Hellebuyck got out.
Yeah.
And by the end of that, he might be a below average goalie.
Yeah. Right.
It's a long
Exactly.
contract, and they're going to still owe him that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and the fan reaction is usually, well, buy him out, but
Yeah. Just buy him out. No big deal.
yeah, but it is a big deal,
Not my money.
because well, but it affects your cap, and you end
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that cares. I mean,
Yeah.
in Detroit, and one of the great, you're a Red Wing fans when you lament the fact that they're still paying off Justin Abdicator's, contract on their cap. Like,
Yeah.
it's just Justin Abdicator. I mean, do you remember him at all? I mean, they're
Yeah.
still
Very.
paying it
Very. Yeah.
off.
Like.
Yeah, like if you're buying out 4 years, even though it wasn't a lot of money, it's over eight.
It's crazy. Isn't
So
Rick DiPietro still getting paid? I think. Something like
so
that.
yeah, no, I mean it's just those kind of things just really kind of irritate
Yeah.
fans. But getting back to again to the Augustine thing, the
Yeah.
question is, should he be concerned whether or not they might lose him? I think that's a possibility.
Yeah.
I think the Red Wings, feel like next year. But I do think one of the issues is Augustine, who's had success. I mean, let's forget, just to remind people who he is, you know,
Yeah.
he's already played against NHL players at the World Championships. He was a college
Right.
player. They got starts in the World
Yeah.
Championships. He's won at the World Junior level, and I
Twice.
think
Right.
I think yeah, and yes, the answer to that. But I do
Yeah.
think that he looks across and he's thinking, I don't want to play for the Walleye, and
Yeah. Yeah.
or more importantly, like Kosa is not going to the Red Wings next year, at
Yeah.
least not starting out. Like he's
Right.
only 22 years old. Like
Yeah.
how many 22-year-old goalies do we see in the NHL?
Yeah.
So
Like.
so
No. I mean, Carter Hart came in at that age, but not
yeah,
many.
and we saw how that worked out.
Right.
And
Exactly.
then yeah, and the kid in Buffalo,
Right.
that we all thought was going to be great. He was in the league at 22, and we've seen how that works out.
Yeah.
So all of those kind of plays into it. But and so I'm like, if Augustine came out, like he was going to have to go to, even if he went to Grand Rapids, well, Coast is going to be there, and he's going to
Right.
be this
Exactly.
established goalie. So at
Right.
least starting out. Now, I believe that Kosa will be with the Red Wings next season at some
At
point.
some point. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I think they want to see kind of where he's at, and they want to, he got one game this year, but it
Right.
wasn't planned. He was a reliever.
Right.
He was up. It was an emergency situation, but the other guy, got hurt and they had to bring him in.
Yeah.
So and the Red Wings slow play their hands in terms of prospects.
Which
So
I'm sure the fans love.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, well, that's the thing. They don't buy into in most places when you're rebuilding.
Yeah.
All you have to sell is hope. You got to
Right.
you got to sell your hope,
You guys
and the
sell
Red
hope.
Wings,
Yeah.
the Red Wings just don't believe in that. You know, they just don't want to sell any
We're
hope.
not selling you hope. No way.
Yeah, no. They want to bring them up when they think they're ready. And and Eisenman does discuss this. And the one thing I really appreciate about Eisenman for, you know, you don't get him a lot if you're a reporter. Like
Yeah.
he's more like the New York Rangers situation where
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
get the general manager like
Yeah. Yeah.
3 times a year or four
Yeah.
times a year,
Right. Right. Right.
that sort of thing. Well, that's how it is in Detroit.
When the
But
white smoke floats out the window,
and
and you get
but
him.
but when you listen to Steve, he really does tell you a lot, and
Yeah.
he explains himself, and he just says that he doesn't like
Yeah.
bringing. He thinks that it can hurt a player's confidence when you bring
Yeah.
him in, and then he plays until he reaches his level of failure, and then
Yeah.
you got to send him back down, and
Yeah.
then
Right.
you got to tell him you got to work on your stuff, and you'll be back here. But what if he works on his stuff and it doesn't come around as quickly as he wants
Yeah.
it to, and so he would rather him go down and then dominate at the AHL level, and then you bring him up and he's photo ready. And
And for fans, it's very much like the backup quarterback saga. Like the backup, if
right,
your quarterback sucks and your backup quarterback was just drafted in the second round or first round, and
yeah.
you have them going, everybody wants to see the backup, but you're not going to do
Yeah.
that right away.
Well, but the NFL, that is a problem for the NHL
Yeah,
because in the NFL you draft guys who
yeah,
step right in and play,
exactly.
and in the NHL you draft guys who may not be ready for 4 years.
Right, and
You
that's and
know,
that's a tough sell, like you said. I mean,
yeah.
you're selling hope in 4 years in the era we live in is like not really a
Well,
doable thing.
no, and we also have no concept about how long rebuilding through the draft takes. Like, if you
Right,
say
right,
that to the average fan, he's going to say, "Well, 5 years."
yeah,
Okay,
right,
so Iserman is in the sixth year, and
yeah,
by all accounts, he's drafted well in the first round. Moritz Seider,
yeah, yes, yeah,
Lucas Raymond,
yeah,
Simon Edvinson,
yeah.
Marco Casper, who looks like now he's going to be a
I
number
really like
two
him.
number
Yeah,
two center. I've talked about Sebastian Kosa,
yeah,
who's in there, and now they have Axel Sandin Palika, who's
yeah.
coming as we speak, maybe on a plane coming over to
Really,
play.
really, right now. Okay.
Yeah, no, to play for he'll probably play for Grand Rapids for a couple
Yeah,
of games, but
yeah,
he broke all kinds of records in the Swedish hockey
yeah.
league. He's kind of, dare I say it, maybe he's their Quinn Hughes, and that's
There you go.
important because the Red Wings passed on Quinn Hughes when they
Yeah,
had a
so did
chance
the
to
Flyers.
draft him. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, he's drafted well. Well, how close do the Red Wings look to being championship caliber team? Not very.
Yeah.
Not,
It's tough to
not
say though.
now. So I think that the idea in a 32 team league that you can rebuild solely through the draft is
No, it's not doable. It's just not at all. I mean,
no.
like you said, the first round, even like the top 10 guys in the first round, you might this year. I think only Lutsenko played for a while of all the besides like the maybe first overall pick or whatever. Lutsenko was like one that played for a couple games for the Flyers in the beginning of the season. Then they sent him back to juniors, but he was a draft pick this year. You never see that, and and then he went to juniors, and now he's back in the AHL, kind of struggling, with the Phantoms. And people are questioning, like he's
Yeah.
been,
Well, I mean, there's so many different ways now to try to win, and
yeah,
I look at being in Vegas where they just despise the draft.
yeah, they do.
They they don't pay any attention to the draft. They don't have any first round picks on their team.
Dare I say
They
it's too much of a gamble for them?
it's way too much of a gamble for them. They don't want to do that, and
Yep,
they're Vegas, so they
yep,
feel, well, we can get free agents to come here,
yeah,
and that's true. And then you look at Bill Zito in
yeah,
Florida, and they're not big on the draft.
right,
They trade their first round picks away, and they've managed to swing a big trade for Matthew Kachuk. They had a goalie already, but they paid him $10 million, and for the longest time, people thought that was ridiculous. But
yeah,
now
right,
look,
right, right.
it looks less ridiculous.
Looks a lot less
And
ridiculous.
yeah, so and they're not sitting around waiting on prospects to
Right, right,
to emerge. So
yeah,
there's got to be somewhere in a middle there where
there does.
you got to bring in some guys to help, because these guys are showing up, but Eisenman has 4 or 5 picks. And I was talking to another Detroit writer, and I said the amazing part of it, every one of these guys has come up and made an impact, but it still hasn't been enough,
Yeah,
because
right,
they,
right,
you and
yeah,
the younger players are doing what they're supposed to. They're sort of taking over the team,
yeah. Which
more
is, and
more, yeah. So
had they made a coaching change earlier? There's all kinds of questions in Detroit, I'm sure. Like they get out of the coaching change, they play better
yeah,
under a coaching change.
I do think that that'll be a question that we will
Yeah,
ask Steve Eisenman at the exit
yeah,
press conference, is in
yeah,
hindsight, should you have made that coaching
yeah,
change earlier?
yeah.
Because Todd McClellan has made a big difference for sure.
It made a huge difference for them, and it's nothing against. Sometimes it's just a matter of fitting the right coach with the right players. It's really not a matter of anything against the old guy. It's just the way it goes. And he's really
Yeah.
made a huge difference. Well, that's all the time we have. We actually went a little long, Kevin. It was so much fun though. It went super fast, and I always love talking to you. And you guys, I enjoyed a nice game at the Fly. I just have a little breaking thing that I just texted that the Flyers just signed Alec Bump, from Michigan. Western Michigan, the championship. They signed him to a 3-year entry-level contract. And I know they're excited about that. The Flyers fans were worried about him maybe going back to the draft, so that's not going to happen. He's going to be a Flyer. And that's it. Without the buzz, remember, it's just hockey. Enjoy the games tonight. 3 possible clinching scenarios tonight. So it'll be a fun night for sure. Take care, everyone. Thank you, Kevin. We're getting out now.